buildings, meaning they could grow their towers to somewhat ridiculous heights. As you might imagine, it became something of a tall tower free-for-all, and so Billionaires Row, home of the notorious 432, was born. Now, there seem to be two main groups of people when it comes to 432, but either way, it gets your attention.
Most towers have setbacks, so you'll be wider at the base, and then as you go up, you set back and you become more and more narrow. So the Empire State Building would come to mind as a classical example of that kind of a setback. What was unique about this was that its shape maintained all the way up and around, which of course is very different.
The architect behind the design is the late Raphael Vignoli, a man who was never afraid to go against the grain. He's the mind behind the Tokyo International Forum, the walkie-talkie in London, and the Battersea Power Station master plan. His legacy really does live on beyond him. And like many architects, he took inspiration from all walks of life. According to Vignoli and Maklow, part of the inspiration for 432 came from one of these, a trash can designed in 1905 by Austrian designer Joseph Hoffmann, and it bears a striking resemblance to the building.
But what's truly staggering are its dimensions. I don't know about you, but sometimes I find you can get a bit desensitised to how big these buildings really are. We always hear that they're X number of metres tall, X number of floors high, but to really show you just how ridiculous 432 Park Avenue is, I want to show you this. This is a scale model of the building of 432 Park Avenue. The footprint is a perfect square. You can see it's got a perfectly square footprint, 28.5 metres on all sides. Now, until 2020, 432 Park Avenue was the tallest residential building in the world, standing 425.5 metres above the city, with a ridiculous width to height ratio of 1:15.
To support a structure of that height, this skyscraper was built with two massive ultra-strong concrete tubes, one inside the other. That inner tube is 9 metres by 9 metres of reinforced concrete that forms the walls, ranging in thickness from 300mm at the top to 760mm at the base. It's the core of the building, and also where you're going to find the lifts and the stairs. The outer tube acts as the tower's frame. This is connected to the inner structure through spandrel beams at every 12th floor. Now, building like this makes a lot of sense when you're catering to the mega-rich. Removing the need for interior columns leaves those pricey apartments flush with space. For example, 432's penthouse has an impressive 8,255 square feet to play with.
I did sell one apartment for a little over $70 million in the building. It sits atop the city in many ways, and you get a vantage point of this grand metropolis in a way that you can't get from other apartments. It's the whole floor, so you get all 360 degrees. And in some ways, it's not a view. In some ways, it's a seat at a show.
Now, if you're a regular viewer of the B1M, you'll know what I'm going to talk about next. Any building this tall is going to be subjected to wind loads and has to design around them. A building's classed as being sensitive to wind loads when it has a width to height ratio of 1:5, but as we know, 432's is 3 times that at 1:15. Now, because of its small footprint in comparison to its very, very high height, any winds hitting the top of the tower could potentially cause it to rock back and forth.
Early testing by RWDI showed that even in low winds, this thing would suffer from something called vortex shedding. That's where the air forces swirl around the building, causing vibration. And that can lead to a few things. Some pretty frustrating noise problems, motion sickness, and more seriously, potential structural damage. To tackle that, they built 5 mechanical floors, each stretching over 2 levels, spaced out all the way up the building.
In theory, those mechanical floors act as brakes for the wind. They create openings across the height of the tower where wind can pass through. That does 2 things. It prevents it being forced down to the ground and causing issues at street level, but also reduces the load at the top. It prevents the forces from being able to hammer the top of the structure too hard. But even that was deemed not to be enough here, so they invested in something called a tuned mass damper at the very top of the tower.
Now, for those of you that don't know, in basic terms, a tuned mass damper, or TMD, is a massive device that swings to level out the movement of a building. But 432 needed more than your ordinary damper. To match the movement of a 432 a massive device that swings to level out the movement of a building. But 432 needed more than your ordinary damper. To match the movement of a skyscraper this tall and thin, you need a gigantic pendulum weighing more than 1,000 tons and measuring 37 metres long. To do that, 8 stories of space would have to be sacrificed and made inaccessible, and that just wasn't going to fly. So the answer was to split this enormous mechanism in half, with each piece going into a narrow corridor on either side of the tower's core, working a bit like an opposed pendulum. The new design fits within 3 stories and allows the dampers to travel up to a whopping 136 inches in any direction, with the aim of was to split this enormous inaccessible, and that just wasn't going to fly. So the answer was to split this enormous mechanism in half, with each piece going into a narrow corridor on either side of the tower's core, working a bit like an opposed pendulum. The new design fits within 3 stories and allows the dampers to travel up to a whopping 136 inches in any direction, with the aim of controlling the building's sway.
Of course, once 432's doors opened, the engineering became an afterthought, drowned out by the much bigger debate around its impact on the skyline. It was launched in 2015 with a very bold marketing plan.
Instead of, filming some boring video that shows off, the bathtubs and the crystal chandeliers and the swimming pool and the amenities, he did something really unique, which was spending $1 million to hire an Emmy-nominated film crew to film a marketing video for 432 Park. And it included the high wire artist Philippe Petit, who's known for walking between the World Trade Center towers in the 70s, high wire walking from the Empire State Building to 432 Park. It was very abstract, it was very artful, it had almost nothing to do with the units in the building, but it caused a lot of ripples in the New York market. Everyone was talking about it.
If you want to watch that video, then I'm afraid we've got bad news for you. It was literally only shown to prospective buyers at the launch, with brief clips dotted online. By 2014, 50% of the building's units had already been sold for a collective $1 billion. That figure jumped to 90% in 2015. It was official, with 432 Park Avenue's apartments proving popular, the cheapest of which still cost more than $1 million by the way. The mega-rich had signed up in droves to grab one of these exclusive homes. 432 was hailed as the pinnacle of luxury living. But that perception was about to change. The building's board, acting on behalf of residents and commercial unit owners, filed a lawsuit against the developers Harry Macklowe and CIM Group. And they didn't hold back.
Construction defect lawsuits are a dime a dozen in New York, and you see them happen particularly in prominent towers. But off the Billionaires Row generation of super tall towers, this has had the worst of it. This is the most dramatic, painful litigation that has happened at a project. And buyers at this building seem to be particularly unhappy.
It's quite long, but I think it's useful context to share this quote from page 3 of the 43-page complaint letter. This case presents one of the worst examples of sponsor malfeasance in the development of a luxury condominium in the history of New York City. What was promised as one of the finest condominiums in the city was instead delivered riddled with over 1,500 identified construction and design defects to the common elements of the building alone. And the sponsor's response to these defects has been equally atrocious.
Ouch.
So what did they want? Well, $125 million in compensation. On top of accusations developers shirked responsibility and looked to push the financial burden onto residents, the board claimed unit owners were facing the following. First, horrible and obtrusive noise and vibrations. It's even stated in the